Fathers of Reddit. In honor of Father's Day, what was your "don't tell your mother about this" moment? Not a real "don't tell your mother about this" moment, but when I was little, my dad had a workshop in the garage where he'd do woodwork. I'd come out and talk to him while he worked, and he'd let me sit on the car that was parked in the garage. He framed it as something that was so bad and edgy and we couldn't tell my mom, and I was 5, so I believed it and felt so cool without actually doing anything wrong or dangerous. My son randomly walked to the kitchen. 3 a.m. was finishing up some Call of Duty and he saw me eating ice cream. So I got him a bowl and we were whispering like nerds. He was 4 and I said "don't tell mom" and he said "don't tell mom." Didn't do the dishes following morning and my wife asked who had ice cream. Son of a bitch pointed right at me. Not a father, but I was with my dad and we thought it was a good idea to start a small fire on the porch. The wooden porch. It was made of mostly paper and we made sure to scatter the embers and everything, but after we went inside and to bed, the wind must have kicked up because we came outside the next day and there was a giant hole burned into the porch. My dad just told me, "Hey, don't tell your mom, I'll get it fixed." He then proceeded to cover it with a small table. She found out anyway and we're pretty lucky that the house didn't burn down. Not a father but a son. We forgot my passport during vacation and were already at the border station when we noticed. My dad then said that we won't turn back but that he will figure something out. Turns out he smuggled me successfully across 3 border crossings without my passport. Before we arrived at home, he told me not to tell my mom about this. While building the outdoor play set for my 5-year-old, I drilled a screw completely through a board and into my shoe, barely stopping just as the screw broke skin. I swore right in front of him, something along the lines of mother. We are sworn to secrecy to this day. Not a father but a story about mine. One day I decided to pull a sick day at school and came downstairs and saw that my dad was making a coffee. I asked him what he was doing and why he wasn't at work and he said I could ask you the same question. We stood in silence for a moment and he said I won't tell your mum if you won't. We had a good laugh about it and he let me have the day off. Dad and I used to rent a movie each week for when Mum had dinner with friends. Usually things like Star Trek or action films. One day I was about 11, he came home with Blade. We got about 10 minutes in and he turns to me and said, "Don't tell your mother about this. Let's just say I forgot to get it this week." Of course I agree. Fast forward 7-ish years. Dad blithely drops at the dinner table the fact that we watched Blade when I was about 11. Silly dad thought there was some kind of statute of limitations on this. Daughter speaking for her father. In high school, everybody was always busy at work or clubs, so I was the first one in my household to get home nearly every single day. Dad was having money troubles that he didn't want to disclose to anyone, so he paid me $5 a month to take the bank statement letter from the mailbox and hide it from my stepmom until he got home. It was the closest thing I got to an allowance. Clearly all this bribery was causing him money problems. This last Christmas my 4-year-old helped my wife wrap one of my gifts. It was late so I was working. The next day, while my wife was at work, she came running through from her bedroom first thing and yelled excitedly, "Daddy, Daddy, I helped wrap your gift. It's a surprise, it's a slushie maker." "Honey, that's awesome, but you aren't supposed to tell me that." I know, but it's a slushie maker. If you know not to tell me, then why did you tell me?" "Because I'm just so excited to make slushies with you." I was crying with laughter at this point and told her that it's an awesome gift but to keep gifts secret. And I told her we wouldn't tell Mummy so she wouldn't be disappointed that I knew what it was. I ended up telling her that evening because it was just too funny and cute. In my 2nd year of college my best friend committed suicide. We were all pretty heartbroken, so my mum and dad drove up from the next province to be with me. My dad, being a great cook, decided he would cook my roommate's friends and I a nice dinner to bring everyone together during the bleak moment. My dad and I ended up getting completely shit-faced as one tends to do during heartbreaking times. He got embarrassed at his drunken state. and snuck out the back door and jumped in a cab without saying goodbye. I was upset he disappeared like that, but he also still had the car keys I needed so I could drive my friends and I to the funeral the next day. I called him and asked him to get out of the cab, and that I would meet him at whatever street corner he was at, which he did. When I found him, he was sitting in the stoop of an apartment building puking and crying. I rolled up and together we staggered home drunk and crying arm in arm. When we got back to my apartment, he was still embarrassed, so he asked to sleep in the car. I said okay, grabbed him a blanket, Pringles and a Gatorade for midnight munchies. I go back inside and no sooner did I sit down did I get a text from him saying he was cold and wanted to come in. I went and got him from the car and he was covered in Pringle crumbs. Like, covered. I dragged him up the sketchy spiral staircase to my apartment and the last thing he said before he went inside and to bed was, "God, your stairs are like Hogwarts, man. Please don't tell your mother," and he passed out. It was the moment I saw my dad as a real person, not just my father. I think a lot of fathers try to be strong and stoic for their kids during hard times, in an attempt to be stable for us. Sharing this heartbreaking moment with him just brought us closer together. I love my dad. Man cooks a mean bavet steak. My dad, brother, and I went out to these dunes near where I live with bottle rockets. We each had an empty milk jug and each took like 20 bottle rockets for ammo. Then, we ran around launching bottle rockets at each other. I was the youngest, which made me the hardest to hit, so I won the rocket war. But yeah, Mom never found out. One night when I was about 8, after I had gone to bed, my dad was playing a Nintendo game. Legend of Zelda, I think. We had both been playing it but we were stuck. He finally found a secret passage, paused the game, and came upstairs to wake me up. He told me he figured out where we were stuck, snuck me downstairs in a blanket I'm sure my mom knew, and I got to stay up after midnight on a school night, hiding under a blanket, to see where the hidden passage went. It was a silly little incident, but very memorable. Not a father, but I have a wholesome story of my own dad. I was born very early, at only 4 pounds. On top of that, or possibly as a result, I have a fragile immune system, especially so when I was young, and up until a few years ago, I got seriously sick, fever, vomiting, sore throat, the whole shebang 5 times or more a year. I would become so dehydrated from vomiting or get such a high fever that at times, I had to be brought into the emergency room. As a result, I drank exclusively Pedialyte to counter that when sick, and I developed a serious distaste and hate for the stuff. My dad was responsible for bathing me one night to help me cool down. I must have been 6 or 7 at the oldest. We were on a vacation, and even as an adult, I always get really sick during or after traveling, and I had inconveniently gotten sick while we were staying in a hotel. I'd had a high fever, and my body was so sore and tired I'd slept for 24 hours. No one could wake me up, and I hadn't drank anything in that time, so my dad put in front of me a very big glass of Pedialyte and told me I had to finish the whole thing while I sat in the bath. I took it as obediently as I could, but a fourth of the way in, I just felt so miserable and mad that I started sobbing. My dad had this heartbreaking look on his face, and stroked my hair, near tears himself. It was late, and we were tired, so he wrapped me up in a towel, and put me in bed with he and Mom. My dad drinks a lot of Mountain Dew, and he told me that for every 3 sips of Pedialyte I get down, I can have a sip of soda to help wash out the bad taste. But don't tell Mom. I never did, and it's one of my favorite memories of me and my dad. Saying this in honor of my dad as he is very old and does not Reddit. He once cut the end of my toe off as a baby, cutting my sharp baby nails, and my screaming brought in my brother. He joined forces to get me all bandaged up and told my mother I'd banged it into a wall or trapped it in a door or something. My mum found out, and by extension so did I when I was 10. A wholesome one. For my mum's 50th birthday he bought her a set of vintage diamond and pearl earrings and a necklace. I helped him choose them out. I'm never allowed to tell her just how much they cost. My dad has passed away, so I'll tell this on his behalf. My sister was maybe 10 or 11. My dad was very worried and had been waiting all day for us to come home from school. When we got home, he pulled her aside saying he needed to have a serious talk with her. He said to her, "I was looking for a pencil, and found this in your desk," and pulled out a plastic baggie filled with some dried plant material. She said, "Oh, catnip." He thought it was pot. We would make little cat toys with catnip, and the bag had ripped, so she put it in a Ziploc bag. He sighed a huge sigh of relief and laughed and told her he thought she was doing drugs and asked her not to tell our mom. He was so embarrassed.